In today's episode, I have the privilege of sitting down with my friend Levi Nelson. Now, over the years, Levi has worn many different hats. He has his doctorate in sports and performance psychology. He's been a high school football coach. He has worked at the professional level, working with the Cleveland Cavaliers and Cleveland Indians. He's a national trainer with the Positive Coaching Alliance, and most recently, he's become an author, writing the book L.E.A.D, a coach's playbook on how to positively impact the world through love, effort, attitude, and discipline. I really think you're going to enjoy this conversation, as you're going to hear Levi's energy and his passion. And what we do is we dive into really developing a coaching philosophy and how do we make our values come to life and really create the best environment and experience for our kids and everyone a part of our program. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Levi Nelson. Levi Nelson, welcome to the Being Champions podcast, my friend.
Matt, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, just congratulations on the podcast. I know this is something that has kind of been on your mind for a while, and just to be invited to be a guest with some of your, I've listened to every episode, all right, during my early morning garage workouts, but, just to be in the same conversations as Trevor and Brett White, these just, like, you want to talk about imposter syndrome. After I heard those guests come on, I'm like, oh my gosh, who am I to be coming on this podcast? But thank you so much for having me. Congrats with the podcast, and I'm happy to be here.
Man, Levi, I appreciate you. And let's tell the listeners how we got connected. So the cool thing is 3 years ago, you were actually my mentor trainer for Positive Coaching Alliance. And, the second I met you, man, there was something about your energy, your passion, like the way you carry yourself. And I knew we connected, and we hit it off right away. So it's like, I need to have Levi Nelson in my circle. So my circle did grow. I appreciate you being on here, man. But before we dive into your book and start talking about your philosophy, share with our listeners a little bit about your background and all the different hats you've kind of worn over these past couple of years.
Sure. Yeah. And Matt, I'm remembering that story as well. You're a very unique individual in that every time I speak with you, I just feel better at the end of the conversation, right? You have this amazing ability. I think about my mother, who I write in my book is the best coach I've ever had. It's just like complaining or a bad attitude was just not permitted around my mother. And I feel that, every time I come to you, it's just like, I need to get up to Matt's level. You're, almost like a Ted Lasso figure, right? I really appreciate who you are. And like I said, just to be in your circle, I feel like I've improved as well. To answer your question, I've been so lucky in my lifetime to just wear so many fun hats, like so many cool things. If you're sitting in a room and just like kind of writing down like wish list of cool things to do, at least in my opinion, I've gotten to do a ton of cool stuff. So I've spent the last 15 years of my life coaching football, and I've went through the various levels of coaching football, but I've got to be a head football coach. And then, just fun, small things along the way. Like I did an internship at Disney World once upon a time, right? I worked in professional sport with the Cleveland Cavaliers and then the Cleveland Indians when I was in Ohio. Even fun things like when I went to college, unfortunately, I knew that my career, like most, was going to end after high school, but I still really wanted to be involved in collegiate athletics. Yeah. And I went to the University of Akron. I said, you know what? I'm going to be the mascot, right? Like I want to be Zippy the kangaroo. And darn it, if I'm going to be a mascot, I want to be the best in the country. So we went out and we won the Capital One Mascot of the Year competition. So just like a ton of fun things along the way. Like, I've gotten to write a book, right? I've gotten to be a head football coach. I've gotten to work with USA Hockey. I've gotten to present to the Green Bay Packers at their coaches clinic. Like so many fun things. And by the way, just as cool things, my family and I, we moved from Ohio to Green Bay back in 2020. And for me personally, like growing up as a Packers fan, to live in this community, for me is just again another fun thing that I've gotten to do along the way. But I know the reason we're speaking and the reason that your listeners are here is just this field of coach development,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
like I said, I've worn that hat of the uh, my first head coaching job, Matt. I kid you not. When hey, you're the head coach, congratulations, like sign on the dotted line. They said, oh, by the way, you've got less than $200 in your budget
Yep.
for the football team and the weight room. I was the weight room coordinator. So I've been in in that position, right? When it's like, where do you start? And then I moved up the ranks a little bit. I got my second head coaching job at a bigger school, and I'm saying, hey, this, and then again, sign on the dotted line, and was told, hey, by the way, you've got less than $100 in your
Yep.
account for football.
Yep.
And by the way, I know you just moved here and you just bought a house, but if we don't pass this school levy, which they hadn't passed a school levy in like 30 years,
Yep.
you're going to lose your job as a teacher. So, I've I've been in the shoes of the middle school coach, of the high school coach who might not have this, great and grand, facility or 100 guys out for the team, or
Yep.
all of these things. I've been in that shoes. So I've become really passionate, Matt, about helping coaches so that they can help others,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
and that's the reason I became a coach. As I said, like being involved in the X's and O's, like that's a lot of fun. I love the strategy behind it. Like I'm trying to win, but at the end of the day, I want to use football as a platform to teach young people life lessons, to build characteristics, to foster love and effort and attitude and discipline. Because, as you know, not every kid we coach is going to the NFL.
Yep.
we we
Yep.
know the statistics of just the chance of them even going to the college level is so small. But as you know, they're all going to be professional moms and dads. They're going to be husbands and wives. They're
Yep.
they're going out into the classroom, to the real world. And I want to use this short time I have as your coach, right, to instill these principles. And I found through the Positive Coaching Alliance, and as I've progressed with USA Hockey and some other organizations, that yeah, I can do a lot of good at one school as a coach, but if I can get on a call and or on a Zoom like this, and we can do a podcast, and I could help a coach, in another time zone or in another state, right? And they can
Yep.
take, and to be honest, that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, because who am I to write a book, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have all of the answers, and if you have observed me through the years, not every practice is perfect, although I did really try to be intentional about the way that I coach. And I feel that I'm a much better coach now than I was when I started, right? But I said, if I could write this book, not only would it be something for my children to read, long after I'm gone, to learn about, hey, this is what dad was trying to do.
Yeah.
It would also help the coach, the business leader, the father, the husband, the mom, or the wife, who are just trying to lead in their own home. You've said this before, Matt, and I agree with you so wholeheartedly that the definition of a coach is to get a person from point A to point B.
Yes.
It's the vehicle to get someone from where they are to where they want to go.
Yep.
And again, that's the reason we wrote the book, not to say, hey, I've got the blueprint for how to be a great football coach, but rather, hey, these are some things that worked for us throughout the years, and you're free to take these and put these into your program right away, experiment, see if they work or not, or build on these ideas.
Yeah, Levi, and as I hear you talk, man, I'm getting fired up because, again, like I said, it's just your passion about this. So let's talk about your book. Your book, Lead, a coach's playbook on how to positively impact the world through love, effort, attitude, and discipline. And this is really why, Levi, I wanted you on this call because all the stuff you were just talking about. And I remember a conversation with Hugh McCutcheon, who's over in Minnesota, and he said, the problem with coaches today is like a lot of times they just ask the coach, hey, are you available from 3 to 5? And if
Yeah.
you're available, guess what? You're going out to coach this team, right? There's no backing, there's no support, there's no real education. It's like, oh, you're available. go coach. And like you said, like a coach oftentimes has the biggest impact besides their parents on a young person's life, right? And they always say we're supposed to teach life lessons through sports, but how do we actually teach these lessons? How do we develop these philosophies? How do we develop values and standards? Again, we tell our coaches what they should do, but where I think we struggle is telling our coaches and guiding our coaches how to do it. So, thinking about that, Levi, when you're forming your philosophy, like how did you go through that process? What are some of the questions you worked through? Again, it's not just what your philosophy is, like how did you get to this point? And now it's a book and it's a handbook, it's a playbook for our coaches, but
Yeah.
how did you get there?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And you hit on so many great things I'm like pounding the table over here as you
Right?
talk. Yes, I agree with that. I think I want to rewind for a moment. It was Steve Jobs who said, like, you can only connect the dots if you work backwards, right?
Yeah.
So I want to work backwards a little bit to where it all started. And I went to college. I was getting my master's in coaching education. And this is when the fire really kind of got lit underneath me. Like I was coaching at the time, but now I'm going to graduate school and I'm studying John Wooden and Vince
Yeah.
Lombardi and Tony Dungy and some of these just great coaches, and I'm learning about them. And our final project for my master's was to develop our own coaching philosophy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could have spent a year on. I was so excited to do it, and I came up with this huge document. I forget, maybe 20 pages or so. And I'm talking about the pyramid of success. I'm talking about Lou Holtz and all
Yeah.
these great coaches that I love. And I turned it in. I was so proud, so excited. Like, here's me, like my ego at the time. Like, this is the perfect this is it. And
Yeah.
I turned it in. And I remember my professor a few days later, like called me into his office, and we had been coaching together. He's one of my mentors. His name is Mike Duve.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, he was like, Levi, I love you. You got some great passion here, but no one's going to read this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like no one's going to remember this. And I see that you're great at identifying what others do, but like, what are you about?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it kind of brought me, to square zero. Like I was like, oh gosh, like and he handed me a book. He didn't leave me empty handed. He gave me a book by Pete Carroll, and it's called Win Forever. This book really changed my life because in the book, Pete Carroll says, hey, essentially what you have is an elevator speech, right?
Hmm.
When you're talking with a parent, when you're talking with a kid in the hallway on why they should come out for the team, you don't have time to recite a 20-page, theology page, right? We're
Yeah. Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
And Pete Carroll invites you. He says, "Hey, you got 25 words or less
Yeah.
to identify your coaching philosophy." And I was just like, "Wow." So I really looked at my whole document, and I sort of was thinking about this, and I just kind of put a pin in it, right? And I went back to coaching. 4 years later, I was at my then the girl I was dating at her house. Her brother was a high school football player. And he
Yeah.
came home and he put a piece of paper on the table and he went up to his room or whatever. And I kind of glanced at the and it real big in bold letters. It said pain. PAIN. And
Yeah.
there's kind of this message like, gentlemen, this year we're going to be successful if you buy into the pain.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
stands for, and I believe it was like purpose, accountability, integrity, and never quit.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
said, ooh, I kind of like that, right? But I had an issue with it, Matt. For me, it was just a little too negative.
Yeah.
I didn't think I could really sell that to parents. And to be honest, it's not authentic to who I am, right? So I kind of had to go back to the drawing board, but I love this idea of an acronym, right?
Yeah.
Of just 4 letters. It wasn't too hard to remember. It was just kind of simple. When I started looking about like, hey, what's most important to me? And to kind of fast forward through the years, I have a really good friend at the Positive Coaching Alliance, but she has her own business in consulting with college sports teams on culture.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about this book, she said, Levi, when it comes to culture, her name is Pam Harith, by the way. She said, here's what you got to identify. Number one, what matters to you? Like
Yeah.
what's important? And then go a little further. Why does it matter? Okay. And then we want to get out in front of it and address the challenges like, okay, what's going to make this hard, right?
Yeah.
What are some adversity you're going to face? And finally, this is the part you hit on earlier is what are the tools and strategies you're going to use to actually put these ideas into practice? Because
Yeah.
as you said, it's easy to put an acronym on a t-shirt, right?
Yep.
Or to put it on your letterhead, email signature. But what does practice look like on a Tuesday afternoon after school, right? Are you going to see these ideas of love, effort, attitude, and discipline injected into our practice, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
to kind of go back in my story, I started looking at, who was the best coach I ever had?
Yeah.
And for me, I said personally, it was my mother. And I write about all these things about how hardworking she was and how great of an attitude she had. And then I thought about, okay, who are my favorite coaches and what were they
Yeah.
about? And I
Yeah.
I, I heard these voices in my head, of John Wooden, focus on the controllables, about effort and attitude, right? And I heard Vince Lombardi and Lou Holtz and these coaches kind of talking about discipline. But for me, I really wanted the first letter to be love
Yeah.
because I'm a huge believer they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I was like, okay, this acronym, that's the most important to me. I find that's the greatest motivator in the world is love. And I said, okay, that's good. And as I started looking, it just kind of came together that I was really about love, effort, attitude, and discipline. And from then on, Matt, not a day goes on in my life where that acronym it doesn't influence excuse me, it influences every decision I make as a human being and
Yeah.
as a coach. That on our practice plans every day, it would be right at the top. Like, how are we going to put these into our practice today, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I did it a little bit different than most. Steve Kerr, he has a great video because again, he was influenced by Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
And Steve Kerr says, we're about compassion, we're about competition, we're about joy,
Joy.
right, at
Yep.
our practices.
Yep.
And for him, he says every practice has to reflect those principles. For me, what one thing that we did is, yes, we tried to do that, but then also like we really put an emphasis on the first day of the week was all about love. So
Yep.
for us in our football practices on a Monday, the theme would be love. And I would have the question up there for all of our assistant coaches, like, how are we going to foster a loving environment today? Tuesday would be about effort. Wednesday would be about attitude. Thursday would be discipline. And then Friday would be lead, right? And we would talk about leadership and different
Yeah.
things. And one thing that I really believe in, if you're working with a team or a group of people, is giving them some autonomy, right? Allowing them to say, "Hey, maybe instead of the word discipline, I'm going to talk about consistency today,"
Yep.
right? But we wanted to allow the other coaches to have a say in this, and so it wasn't always just Coach Nelson, right, talking about these qualities. But and I say this again, Matt, the book, I share the process of how I came to find that acronym LEAD. But I really challenge the reader to come up with your own
Yeah.
acronym,
Yep.
right? Because LEAD is very important to me based on how I was brought up, based on my values. I write in there that it's important to me because of, again, not only how I was brought up, but also because of my Christian faith,
Yep.
and also because of my background in sport and performance psychology. That was one of my favorite parts of my doctorate is I got to take this college essay that I wrote, Love, Effort, Attitude, Discipline, and I got to examine the research in sport and performance psychology. And what I found is that it works,
Yeah.
right? Like
A
when you're a
100%.
coach,
Yep.
when you're a coach and you're talking about effort and attitude and discipline and love, it actually, the results show that we're going to get better athletes because of that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's something I believe in with my whole heart, but I understand that I'm not the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
So I really tried to get everyone to come up with their own coaching philosophy. But then I share like, hey, this is how we instilled love into our practices. This is how we tried to teach effort and attitude. And I tell you what, Matt, do you want to go into some of that right now, like some of those principles?
Yeah, man. So as I hear you talk, of course, my wheels are spinning, and a couple things that jumped out was the intentionality, right? We always
Hmm.
talk about culture, and culture is going to form one way or the other, right?
Hmm.
I always say culture is this living, breathing thing. But then if you look at the simple definition of culture is how we do things here, right? And as I hear you talking, and I've read your book, and I know your practical steps to bring this to life. Like, how do we take all these things? Like we always put the values up on the wall. Like you walk into facilities, you might see the love, effort, attitude, and discipline on
Yeah.
the wall, right? And we
Yeah.
have a mutual mentor in Jerry Lynch. And
Yeah.
Jerry always challenged me. He says, Matt, how do you take it from the wall and bring it to the ball? Right?
Oh, yeah.
So think about that. So when we're looking at love, when we're looking at effort, we're looking at attitude and discipline. How did you bring love into it? And I know you talk about this one word and how you define
Sure.
love. Like, how does that show up? How does effort, with effort terminology, all this stuff, how did you bring these things to life? So it's from the wall to the ball.
This is just so kind of funny how that works. Like I obviously had no idea you were going to talk about from the wall to the ball, but let's use that, right? Let's
Yeah.
go from the wall to the ball. So when it came to love, one thing that we would do with each player, and this isn't unique to me. I mean, a ton of other people do this, but we would sit down and there was a process we went through, something that John Gordon taught in one of his books, called "One Word Would Change Your Life."
Yeah.
And we had every athlete come up with one word that would sort of be their motivating factor for the upcoming season, right? So our program's philosophy was lead.
Yeah.
I was going to use my platform to try to instill those qualities because I believe in them. However, I wanted to get to know my athletes. So
Yeah.
Matt, at the end of this exercise, and it took a couple weeks, you would finally come up with a word. And I'll just give you an example. We'd have a lot of athletes that kind of had the stereotypical like grind
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
all these things. I had one kid and he wrote seal. And I'm like, seal? Like I've never seen that before. What does that mean? And he
Yeah.
told me, well, coach, when this is all done, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And I know to do that, I need to be a servant leader. I need to give effort. I need to have great attitude and I need to love other people. And I just, so that brought a little bit us together, right? And I could throughout the season talk to him about being a Navy SEAL. And when he wasn't living up to that expectation, I could kind of
Yeah.
say, like, hey, like this is what you said you wanted. I know it's tough right now, but how's a SEAL going to act, in
Yeah.
this circumstance? And what we did with those words is every individual would write down their word and put them right as we went out of the locker room onto the practice field, sort
Yeah.
of like the play like a champion today sign, right? Like
Yeah.
when they're going out to practice. And everybody would have to slap that sign just as a reminder of their one word. So again, I thought it was funny you talked about the wall. Well, we
Yeah. Yeah.
literally put it on the wall for us to see. And when I talk about effort, um, for us, one thing that we did I thought was very successful is on our wall. I had a big dry erase board, right?
Yeah.
I actually had
Yeah.
two that would fit in for this, but whenever I saw a player who would give effort, and that could be like sweeping up the locker room, it could be
Yeah.
an email from a teacher, hey, so and so stayed after class to help his classmate out. I would write down his number on the dry erase board, right,
Yeah.
and it would be in there, and when the team came in, they would see number 16. Right, they would see number 57.
Right.
And at the beginning of practice, I would bring out a helmet sticker and say, hey, you know what? This wasn't because someone scored the winning touchdown or had an interception. It's rather because he was the first person down on kickoff, right?
Yeah.
When the
Yeah.
coaches were watching the film, that was great effort. And we want to recognize that right now, so we would give out that helmet sticker. And what we found is that when we rewarded effort, right? Everyone is capable of giving effort,
Yeah.
and more people tried to work hard in practice. It's amazing that what you reward, right, is what the players are going to start showing. And then we had another dry erase board. I'm not sure if this is, yeah, I think it's in the book, but it came from Dabo Sweeney, right? He called the windshield wiper
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
It's in there.
walked out of
Yep.
the locker room, and it was a big car windshield. And we said, hey, this is what's in the rear view mirror, but this is what we're going for, right? This is this game's week, or whatever, this practice. So again, always giving players something that we were moving toward. And then when it came to attitude, again, talking about the wall, I think this is I might be most proud of this just because I really think everybody should be doing this. We had we put a magnet in the players' lockers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And On the magnet, again, I love dry erase boards because as a coach, I don't have to print out all these papers. I don't find them laying on the locker room floor or crumbled in the. So, but there would be a question, and it would say, "Hey, what is one goal I have for today's practice?"
Yeah.
Right? When I was a high school athlete, I had this weird idea. I was like, I get better because I go to practice. When
Right.
we know
Yeah.
that's not really the case, right? It's
Yeah.
not a video game. I'm not going to magically progress just because I'm there, because you could go to school and not learn anything, right? You could just daydream. But so
Yeah.
what's one specific goal you have for practice today? So again, that's an effort goal. Somebody might write, I want to have low pad level. I want to, whatever it might be. As a coach, I could kind of peek in somebody's locker and I could look at that dry erase board and I could say, oh, this is their goal during stretching lines,
Yes.
right? I could
Yeah.
talk to the athlete and I could say, hey, I saw that we want to work on our back pedal today. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I agree with you, right? I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that today. And what does that do? It strengthens our connection. It goes back to love.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
goes back. And the other question we had in there before practice was, what are three things I'm thankful for today?
Hmm.
Right? And we would have athletes who would say, "Hey, I'm thankful for my parents who gave me a ride." Right? And
Yeah.
we know that those athletes were not saying that to mom and dad, but it allowed me to give mom or dad a call or a text and say, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, right? But Henry said he was thankful for you."
Yeah.
Right? He's thankful that you gave him a ride to that camp this weekend that was 2 hours away. So
Mhm.
he might
Yeah.
not say it, but just know that he's thankful. At the end of practice, athletes had to say, here's one thing I did well today.
Yeah.
And then it had to say, here's one thing I want to get better at.
Yeah.
And this is how I'm going to do it. What's great about this system, Matt, is it did not take up any of my practice time. I hear that from coaches so
Yeah.
much. I
Yeah.
don't have time to teach all this stuff. I only have 2 hours and we've got to get going. It's like, hey, this is stuff they're doing before practice. This is stuff they're doing after practice.
Right.
And it taught me a lot about who I was as a coach because when it said, hey, this is what I did well today, I had an athlete one time write nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to talk about humbling yourself as a coach. Here's Levi Nelson, who's all about positivity and whatever, and he feels like he did nothing well today. So it allowed me to take a hard look in the mirror and say, hey, as a coaching staff, we've got to do a lot better, myself included. It invited another conversation the next day of like, let's think about practice, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you're being too hard on yourself here, right? So again, it just led to a lot of conversations that might go unhad if the coach is just thinking about the X's and O's, right? Because we
Yeah.
all know coaches are spread too thin. There's not enough time. And before you know it, the season's over.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I did not do that thing that I wanted to do in preseason. Why? Because I got busy. But I feel like I was very intentional about how we tried to, and there's multiple things. It's not just, the one example. We tried various methods, and I hope that those stick around with all the kids that I was lucky enough to coach.
Yeah, Levi, what I love, man, is not once have you really talked about outcomes. You haven't talked about results, right? You talked about your system, and the system looks far deeper than all this stuff. Scoreboard, because again, at the end of the day, we can't control this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think of James Clear quote where he says, "We don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the levels of our systems," right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're creating. Like, and again, it's about this intentionality and making sure the kids buy into something bigger than just this scoreboard, than bigger than just the
Yeah.
results, right? And it comes back to your word love, right? You're
Yeah.
building something special. Like when you're talking about you're trying to positively impact the world through this stuff, like I can hear it and I can just see your crew like buying into this, right? Because you're super intentional about it. And think about the coaching staff, how much more connected you're getting with your kids because you take that 5 minutes, you walk through the locker room and you see what every single kid is working on, right?
Yeah.
And you said at the beginning, it's not about how much you know, it's how much you care, right? And if
Yeah.
we can show that to our kids, they're going to run through the wall, right? And
Yeah.
Matt,
Yeah.
forget about the wall to the ball. They're going to run through the wall for you. And the last thing that I love that you put in your book, man, is talking about looking at discipline. And you talked about this concept of get to. your
Yeah.
get to list, because literally I wear a bracelet. Our listeners can't see it, but I wear a bracelet that says I get to. So when you mention that as far as discipline, how did you make that shift to the I get to help build in this discipline within your environment?
Oh, great question, Matt. And in full transparency, and especially I think if you talk to my wife,
Yeah,
I might fail sometimes with the L and the E and the A, even though I try. I feel like the discipline is probably where I shine the most as a person.
yeah,
And man, I sign up for a lot of stuff, right? I joke sometimes. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? I
right,
wear a
right.
lot of hats. I
You'll
think
get there one day.
yeah, I think last time we count, I'm working six, jobs part time as we currently speak, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it, you wear a lot of hats, you have a lot of things you're interested in, and I heard a coach. He was the most successful, winningest coach in the history of Texas high school football. So we're
yeah,
gonna talk about like a big time coach, and he had a to-do list, and every day he said it's a preset list. Saturday mornings, he prints out the list. It has everything he's got to do Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, one to keep track and get him ready for a Friday game. I
yeah,
said, that's perfect. So I emailed the coach. He sent me his copy, and I just kind of adapted it throughout the years. One thing that was important to me, Matt, is to separate the lists and like this is who I am. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a friend. Like that's who I am. This is what I do. Like
yeah,
we're gonna
yeah,
separate the what I do from it. But I told you I sign up for a lot of things, right? So I have a lot of what I do. I just have one item every day. And I say, like, if I'm going to be able to continue to do these things, I've got to check that box every
yeah,
day.
yeah,
And at sometimes I think parents and teachers and coaches, we can feel overwhelmed because there is so much to do, right? But then you got to remind yourself, I get to do this.
yeah,
I am
yeah,
so lucky. I just personal story. My father had MS, and he it was tragic, but kind of lost control of his legs throughout my lifetime. And I remember coming home from a football practice one day, just kind of complaining as a sophomore, like, "Oh, we had to run so many sprints. I'm so tired. My legs are so." And I remember him looking at me from a wheelchair and saying, like, "I wish my legs could be sore. Like,
right.
I
Yeah,
wish for that." And from that moment on, I really tried to, and again, I was kind of polished through my mother's positivity throughout the years. But I said, like, yeah, we get to do all those things. Like, I am so lucky to be healthy, and my children are healthy. And to all those parents who feel like a taxi driver, just driving kids around,
yeah,
doing all
yeah,
those things, like, how lucky are we that we get to do that? That we have a car, right, and can put gas in the tank. And so again, I think it's just a daily reminder that I get to do all of these fun things and to have conversations like this and to help coaches throughout the country. Like I'm just the luckiest guy. So
yeah, and I love that. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because what you do there is you create an environment where gratitude shows up every day. And like, think about as we go through our grind or we go through our daily stuff, like we sometimes lose sense of how lucky we really are. And thinking
yeah,
about it from an athlete perspective or from a coaching perspective, like our career in sports is so short, right? And to be able to have more of this purpose and this energy, like I get to show up to practice every day. I get to be a great teammate. I get to
mhm,
be a great coach. I get to have an impact, right? And that's what your whole book's about, Levi, is this impact. This is what we get to do,
yeah,
right? And when we make that shift and we look through it through the lens of I get to rather than I have to, right? And thinking of it as a chore, right? Imagine the energy we're creating for our kids. And that's what it's about, right? The
yeah,
mindset, the environment, the behaviors we're creating, like that is something we get to do every day. And that's the best part for me. That's why I love coaching. That's why I show up every single day with this crazy drive, passion, energy. Like the kids know, like I'm a spaz. I absolutely love what I do. But with that being said, we're kind of running short on time. Like,
sure.
what is like a final thought to leave with our coaches? One last thing that you want to leave so we can continue to create the best environment and experience for our kids.
Great question. With that, one thing I would say, as I wrote, like, what makes it hard, right? Like, what's the hard part for that? Is that as coaches, we don't necessarily get to see the results of our labor all the time,
Yeah.
right? So I would say if you're the coach who is just kind of banging his head or her head against the wall, thinking like, "Oh, I'm not making a difference," this and that. It's we never know. We don't get to choose, Matt, what student athletes remember,
Yeah.
right? Like we don't get to choose that. So the words that we say now, right? Like those could be the words that are in our athletes' head when they're adults and they have to make that tough decision. They could think back to that coach that they had, right? Who told them not to give up, right? And
Yeah.
those could be the words that keep them going. The other thing I would say, Matt, is that gosh, if you're a coach and you have a playbook for offense and you have one for defense, why don't you have one for the culture you want to build?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I had a friend who just had his first head coaching job, and he, like many coaches, he spread very thin, and it was a tough season for him. They did not see many wins, and I reached out to him like, "Hey, keep your head up. Like I'm such a better coach now because I had those tough seasons." And and he said, "You know what? I got so excited with the X's and the O's, and I had to do all the fundraising, and I had to do all these things." That I kind of forgot about the culture,
Yeah.
right? And,
Yeah.
and our team made some decisions in the game that did not reflect who I am, right? It didn't reflect the team that I want to coach. So I think there's so many coaches in his shoes. It's like we have good intentions, but then we get busy, and it's like, no, we need to be on the forefront, and that's why I'm so passionate about speaking to different teams and to working with teams. Like I don't want to just speak to a team and never come back. Like I
Yeah.
want to be
Yeah.
just a resource for a coach. And that's some of the work I do now with some different consulting, is just trying to help coaches, give them some ideas, but then also just like, hey, we need to invest in the culture piece. So those would be the two things to kind of end on, I think.
I love that, man. And again, this is why you're still part of my life, because of the passion and the energy you bring. And I know our listeners are going to feel that. So how can our listeners actually connect with you if they want to learn some more? Where can they get the book? Tell your listeners how they can connect.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So one thing is, if you go on Amazon and type in my name, Levi Nelson, and Lead, that book's going to come on, and you're able to do that. I'm also probably most active on Twitter, on X, and I'm at R Levi Nelson is my name there. I've got a picture. My hands are up. I'm kind of pumping up the crowd. I don't know if you have show notes here, Matt, but I'd be happy to put my email in there. I have an email just to help coaches, and
Okay.
that's coach Levi Nelson at gmail.com. But there's some new exciting things coming up, Matt. Like some things that I've got on the burner, and we're not boiling yet, but we're simmering.
Yeah.
And if you listen to this call and you want to connect with me, please reach out to me on social media, or with my email from Matt. And I'd love to get connected, because there's a lot of exciting stuff that I'm not ready to announce yet, but it's coming. And I would love to help you if we're a good fit. So
Well, Levi, man, I can't thank you enough, man. I appreciate you. I know you're gonna have a tremendous impact on our coaches. So I just gotta thank you again for being on the Being Champions podcast, my man.
Matt, my mom says this as she leaves. She says, "Don't change a thing." And to you, I will say, don't change a thing, my man. Keep that energy going. Keep those kids, keep those coaches going. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. We'll catch up soon. I hope everyone enjoyed today's conversation with Levi. My big takeaway was just really fine-tuning a coaching philosophy. And Levi challenges everyone to write their philosophy in 25 words or less. He got that from Pete Carroll. So the challenge to our coaches is send us your coaching philosophy in 25 words or less. Email it to us so we can see where you're at and how we can help you develop that philosophy and how you can bring that philosophy to life every single day. Really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I can't wait for y'all to tune in next week. Coach Jared, Coach Mike, and I are going to dive into the topic of building connection and how we need to treat every single player we come across as a person first, athlete second. So thanks again for listening to the Being Champions podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.